中非关系正处在历史上最好时期。
China-Africa relations have today reached a stage of growth unmatched in history.
登高望远，
We should scale the
步
heights,
步前行，
look afar, and
让
take
我们
bold
携手
steps.
努力，
Let us join hands and pull the vision and strength of the 2.4 billion Chinese and Africans
和力量，共同开启
and open a new era of China-Africa win-win cooperation and common development.
谢谢大家。
Win-win cooperation for common development. That's the theme for the 6th Forum on China-Africa cooperation. Now this weekend, African heads of state are in Johannesburg, South Africa, to meet with China's President Xi Jinping to further strengthen China-Africa ties. This is the first time the summit is being held on African soil, and it has been hailed as a milestone, as historic, and a new reality for both China and Africa. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Established in 2000, the primary aim of FOCAC is to promote bilateral ties between China and Africa through dialogue. As the host of the first summit on African soil, South Africa's ability to facilitate that dialogue is paramount to its success. While I sat down with South Africa's ambassador to China, Dolana Msimang, she tells me about the importance of the FOCAC mechanism. Ambassador Msimang, thank you very much for your time. First of all, South Africa is hosting the Forum for China and Africa Cooperation as a summit for the first time in Africa. How significant is this for South Africa, and how significant is it for Africa?
As you well said, this is the first summit taking place on African soil, and it's what the senior officials actually requested last year in the senior officials meeting. And therefore, you can see that it's something that's very welcome and well sought after by South Africa and African states as well. For us Africans, it was very important that this relationship with China is also anchored on African soil. And the significance of that is really cementing the relations as mutually beneficial.
In terms of mutually beneficial, though, this summit is going to be seen moving forward as some sort of a game changer in terms of China and Africa relations. How is it going to shape future China-Africa relations?
Africa is very keen on developing. As you know, it's the last continent it's the least developed continent in the world, and we took a decision that we want to change that. If you remember, at the beginning of this century, we said this is an African century, and it's 10 years since this century started, and I think there's anxiety to make sure that we fast track our development. And therefore, the benefit for Africans would be to have the fast tracking of development, and China seems to be the most keen of all the outside countries to assist and to work with Africa in pushing that development forward.
Where are the areas of opportunity, though, for Africa within FOCAC?
The areas of opportunity, in fact, what has been spelled out as the priority is the industrialization of Africa. And you may well know where this industrialization keenness comes from. It comes from the fact that for the past, I don't know how many years, Africa, the continent that is very rich in natural resources, has been sending out natural resources and buying back finished goods from other countries. And this hasn't been a comfortable situation for us. And what we do want to do as Africans is to have a value add here in our continent and send out finished goods. That will assist us in both our development and in our unemployment and general development of the continent. So that's the one area, but that's the major area which I think is obvious to many people.
Let's look at Africa's agenda within FOCAC, though. What is Africa's agenda?
Africa's agenda within FOCAC is to get all its issues in one forum. You will find that people experience different things as individual countries in their bilateral relations. When it comes to FOCAC, we are all gathered together. We're able to have a view, a similar view, and tackle issues as a collective. And that helps to unlock, as I mentioned before, all the obstacles that may have been there, and also to see patterns where you thought this problem was only occurring to you, you then see a pattern with other countries, and therefore you are able to find solutions. So it creates a one-stop shop for Africans to discuss all their development issues with China, and China as well to discuss with Africans in one roof, if I put it like that. And that sort of gets things going a bit faster than if you just relied on bilateral relations.
At the end of this summit, what would Africa like to see that may have happened?
At the end of the summit, I think the Africans would like to see us having favorable financial dispersions from China. They would like to see real commitments from the Chinese on the sort of investments they are going to do in Africa. As we speak right now, China is only investing 3% of their investments are going to Africa. And if this translates to major investments going to Africa, the Africans would very much like to see that. They would like to see projects that are more beneficiation projects, and they would like to see the fast pace of that happening in order to allow real growth to take place as soon as possible, really, because as I said before, we are trying to catch up with the whole world.
Ambassador Msimang, thank you very much for your time. Well, the forum may be held in South Africa, but every African country has representation here. A ministerial meeting was held in Pretoria, and I caught up with some African ministers to find out about their expectations on the dialogue.
Our experience in Kenya, has been that this is a valuable relationship for us, and one that has been evolving. It did not start this way, but now it's on a really, really great track, and we think that it's a track that must be sustained. And I think that's why we're all here, to make sure that we continue on that track, that we sustain it, that we nurture it, and that we ensure that it continues working for both of us. We make sure that it's a win-win for both Africa and China.
The first point to mention is that it meets at the level of the heads of states and government. The second is that this session of the FOCAC takes place after we have adopted the new development agenda for the world, but especially after we have adopted at the AU level the 2063 agenda, which means that we're going to concentrate on agreeing on ways of helping African countries implement this 2063 agenda.
To the ordinary person on the street is jobs, it's also opportunities, also because when we have investment in our country, we also get an opportunity of beginning to harvest the capital that comes in, and that harvest also has got second round effects in the economy as it moves gets invested in our economy.
We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll have more on the 6th Forum on China-Africa Cooperation 2015. Stay with us.
A partnership that's helping transform Africa by teaming up with China. Leaders and experts are gathering in Johannesburg to map out the next step. CCTV News will be at the forum to bring you the highlights, the newsmakers, and what it all means to you. Join us in December for our special coverage, only on CCTV News.
We are pleased that the FOCAC Summit is taking place in Africa for the first time. The decision clearly illustrates the underlying ethos of the FOCAC platform, which is mutual trust, equality, and partnership.
That was South African President Jacob Zuma speaking on the importance of the 2015 Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Now, as a further sign of their dedication to the African continent, China in January of 2015 established a permanent mission at the African Union. Now, I sat down with the Ambassador Huang Weilin. He tells me about the working relationship between China and Africa. Ambassador, thank you very much for your time. Let's start by looking at FOCAC today, celebrating its 15th year. How significant is FOCAC for you today, 15 years after its inception?
It is very significant in the sense that it provides new impetus for the relationship between China and Africa, and also provides new directions for cooperation between the two sides in many areas in the many years to come. So I think that a new momentum has been built up. So we are very sure that China and Africa will work more closely together. The relationship between the two will enter a new phase. For that, I'm very proud because I've been very much involved in the preparations of the FOCAC summit, and I'm hopeful that these FOCAC summits will bring about a lot of benefits, not only to Africa and China, but also for the international community.
Well, now, you were China's first ambassador to the African Union. What is the significance, though, of having a Chinese ambassador at the African Union?
I think the decision to have a permanent mission of China to the African Union was a strategic decision because it shows that China now attaches more importance to Africa, attaches more importance to the African Union, because as I believe that Africa is rising, and the African Union is now playing more and more important role in the integration, peace, security, and settling of some regional issues. I think that we need to keep up with the times by having a permanent mission to the African Union. So I think that this shows that we want to work with Africa, work with the African Union in particular for a lot of projects. And also, you know, last May, actually May last year, our Premier visited the headquarters of the African Union. And during his visit, he announced that China was going to set up the Chinese permanent mission to the African Union. So I'm here to implement his decision. Also, he announced that China was going to work with the African Union on 3 transport networks: network of regional aviation, railway, and highway, and industrialization. So I think that for us, we've got a lot to do to implement the consensus reached between Chinese Premier and the chairperson. So that is the main purpose of our mission here.
China can provide what Africa needs, and Africa can provide what China needs. What does Africa need?
I think that the agendas of the both sides are quite similar. I think that the both sides are of the view that more efforts should be made to enhance cooperation in areas such as industrialization, agricultural modernization, public health, people-to-people exchanges, peace and security. These are the common aspirations of China and Africa. So I think that both sides agree that we need to work together in these fields. I think that under the new circumstances, the cooperation between China and Africa is now faced with golden opportunities. Africa can provide what China needs. and China can provide what Africa needs. I'm of the view that China and Africa are perfect partners, perfect match. So I'm very confident that more achievements will be made in our relationship and cooperation with Africa.
In terms of the political relationship, where is that relationship?
I think the relationship, actually, political relationship, dates back to many, many years. In 1960s, 1970s, China and Africa supported each other. At that time, for political reasons. But now that kind of relationship has been transformed to be very comprehensive, not only political relationship, but also economic partnerships. So the relationship now has become very comprehensive, covering a lot of areas. I think this, the relationship has becoming more and more mature. Other than economic relations, actually people-to-people exchanges have been on the rise. You know, currently there are 40,000 African young people studying in China. So it is a very good thing, and also, you know, there are quite some Chinese Confucius institutes across the continent. So the people's relations now also has become a very important component of the overall relationship, and I'm very glad that the trend is still growing, and I want to do more to promote that kind of relationship.
Now, looking forward, because we are at the 15-year point of FOCAC, looking forward at this relationship and China's views through FOCAC and China's agendas through FOCAC for the next 15 years or 10 years, where does China see its relationship with Africa?
I think the relationship would be better and better. The prospects are good. I think that as far as China is concerned, we will be very much focused on providing, in helping Africa provide better food, offer more job opportunities, and better medical treatments. So I think that in the next few years, we definitely will be more focused on these three things, because these three things really are related with the ordinary people. Also, we will be, I think, we'll be focused on 6 areas: industrialization, which will be very important, which will generate more job opportunities. Secondly, is the agricultural modernization. I think that Africa food security is still a big problem for many people in many countries. We want to do more for Africa. Thirdly is the public health. I think that China certainly is committed to providing more medical assistance to Africa. We're discussing with the African Union about the establishment of African Center for Disease and Control. We want to be part of it, and people exchanges. I think that a good relationship really requires more people, the more participation of the people, requires the better understanding between China and Africa. And lastly, peace and security. Without peace, there will be no development. So in this regard, China is ready to do more. Not long ago, our president has announced that China is going to provide $100 million military assistance to the African Union for its building of standby force and a rapid deployment force. And certainly will be also involved in some regional issues. We have dispatched 700 strong peacekeepers to South Sudan. So we are here. We want to make a difference. We want to make our contributions to Africa in the area of peace and security, which is very, very important for Africa's development.
Ambassador, thank you very much. When it comes to Africa's relations, the African Union plays a vital role in coordinating the African narrative. Well, the African Union Commission Deputy Chair Erastus Mwancha told me about the importance of China's relations at the African Union and why mechanisms like FOCAC go a long way in promoting Africa's agenda. Mr. Mwancha, thank you very much for your time. Now, let's just begin by looking at the FOCAC summit here being held for the first time on African soil. It is the culmination of 15 years of China and Africa cooperation under the FOCAC. What stands out for you, though, as China meets Africa on the African soil today?
Well, thank you, Beatrice, for having me on your program. In the last 15 years, if you look at what has happened between China and Africa, it's phenomenal. Whether you look at trade, which has grown from just the mere about 10 billion, and now is facing 300 billion. But we have also seen huge growth in investment, and investment in very many sectors, whether it is energy, infrastructure, in manufacturing, name it. But we have also seen it in people-to-people cooperation. China offering, scholarships to African students, but also China opening up facilities in Africa for China-Africa cooperation. So I would say this has been a tremendous cooperation between Africa and China in the last 15 years.
What has been Africa's agenda in FOCAC, though, over the last 15 years?
First of all, when FOCAC was launched, Africa had not developed its own agenda as such, but it was agreed right from the beginning that we would focus on those areas that would enhance integration, like infrastructure, but also areas that would enable Africa to be competitive globally. But since that time, we now have what we call Agenda 2063, and it's so gratifying to tell you that when you look at the main frame of FOCAC, it is based on Africa's what we call 2063 Agenda and its 10-year implementation program. In this, there are a number of sectors key. First is infrastructure, second is industrialization, third is health sector, and the fourth is also promoting technology, where China is ready to come to Africa and set up industrial parks for investment, but also be a nucleus for technology. I should say here too that China has also opened cooperation in the area of finance, lines of credit, and also invested in African financial institutions like the African Development Bank and such like banks, where China has given up to over $70 billion in the form of lines of credit.
Where do China's and Africa's needs meet, though? Because China has a market of over 1 billion, Africa now has a market of 1 billion. Where do their needs converge?
China and Africa are both developing countries, but China has done a lot of work. In the last 10 years, China has been able to lift over 700 million people out of poverty. Now China is looking at a remaining of about 7 million people that China would have more or less completed the chapter of elimination of poverty in China. Africa, of course, has a huge challenge in the area of poverty. And so this is one of the areas that we talk about between Africa and China. It is people-centered. How do we create jobs? How do we help Africa industrialize? How do we get Africa's voice heard in the multilateral fora? And how do we ensure that areas like trade are opened, that China can open to Africa's trade, but also globally, that we can have fair trade globally?
We're looking at industrialization because that's one of the key issues that's been coming out of this forum as part of what Africa really wants to happen for the continent. China also has pledged that it will align its industries with Africa to help in that in accelerating that industrialization process. What are the stumbling blocks first for Africa, and how would Africa want to take advantage of that industrialization policy of China?
A number of things that we need to look at. One is integrate our own market. That's not China's business, because even when you talk of Africa having 1 billion plus people, this market is not integrated. Once you integrate this market, then you create economies of scale meaning that you can bring Chinese investors to Africa and take advantage of that investment. But nonetheless, we still see those industries now that are setting foot in Africa because, don't forget, China is now moving to a middle income country, and because of that, it's giving up quite a number of jobs that normally don't go with a country that is still emerging. And up to about 100 million jobs could be given in China in the next 1 decade, which means Africa should position itself to take all these jobs to Africa.
Infrastructure is still very key for the continent, and Premier Li Keqiang had mentioned previously that China had a vision for Africa, connecting Cairo to Cape through infrastructure. What is the status of that progress, though?
We made quite some tremendous progress in this. And of course, we envisage this to be implemented in various aspects, national level, in the regional level, and of course, continental level. A number of these projects have already started. For instance, we have seen the rail between Ethiopia and Djibouti. It's already on track, and that will be ready next year. You have seen the rail project starting from Mombasa to Nairobi, and which will be extended to the countries in Eastern Africa. That is already on track. We have projects which are going to be in the southern part of the continent. We have projects which are in North, in Egypt, in Morocco, and all those countries. So the program is already. Our role now is to coordinate this so that when all these projects are being implemented, they will eventually form a one network for the continent.
It's going to form a one network for the continent, and you also talked about taking advantage of Chinese markets. But one of the issues that has been a challenge for the continent has also been that question of regional integration to, promote better trade, intra-Africa trade. How is Africa going to take advantage of the Chinese market when it already is unable to take advantage of its own market at home?
China is already trading with Africa in a big way. What China is taking from Africa, and this is one of the discussions we've been having here, is, for instance, huge in market for Africa's raw materials. And what we are now discussing with China is to say, can you add value on the African continent, some of these products, before they end up in China? That will mean you will create jobs in the continent. So there is already trade taking place. The question is, in what form? At the moment, it's more of a format of raw materials. And we are saying add value so that we can be able to create jobs in Africa. And China is cognizant of that fact. That's why in one of our framework for cooperation, the MOU we signed with the Prime Minister of China, industrialization is key.
FOCAC is now looking at the past 15 years agenda. Looking ahead to the next 15 years, where will China and Africa relations be?
I think there are two words that underline that. A win-win cooperation. And what that means, we're now taking this cooperation to a higher level. Win-win because we want to identify those areas in which Africa wants to focus on attention, like in the area of value addition. And of course, to encourage Chinese investment in Africa and to make sure that China will see Africa as a viable partner, as a partner is dependable. And of course, beyond that, we have also agreed that we work with China not only in our bilateral cooperation, but also multilateral cooperation.
Mr. Mwencha, thank you very much.
Thank you, Beatrice, as usual.
And that's all we have time for on Talk Africa this week. Do join us again next week for another edition of the program. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Goodbye.